Hello and welcome back to On the Beaten Track. I'm your host, Rihanna. Thank you for everybody who's interacting or watching the YouTube videos. I really do appreciate it. The Instagram, Facebook and TikTok watching from the shorts that I've been releasing has been amazing. Response been really good, so thank you so much for that. What I really need is for you to like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube so that I can keep growing the channel. My big aim right now would be to get to 1,000 followers. So please hit that subscribe button. It's right there. Thank you so much for those of you who have already done it. Today's journey starts for me 30 years ago. When I was 16, I obviously decided I knew the world and I made some decisions. One of those was I was never going to marry. I just always felt like a fish out of water, always felt like on my own vibe, wasn't really connecting always with people like that. So I really thought it was an impossible task for me to find somebody that I clicked with that I would want to marry. And then later I was just like, why is this even necessary? We'll get to how we got here. No? Because that is, what it's doing. So I was going to be a good worker and not stir the pot and be financially independent, which some of that I did. I was a good worker. I became financially independent. I did not follow the don't stir the pot part. Yeah. One of the big ones that year, I decided that I was going to adopt a kid. I don't even know what brought this on or what actually made it so strong in my person that this is what I wanted to do. I didn't think about not having a partner. It was a connection on so many kids not having a home in my mind, and I thought, well, it makes more sense for me to adopt a kid than make one. Okay? I would be a good worker, I'll be financially independent, and I would be able to adopt a kid. I was very content with this action plan. No problems with it. 4 years. And in actual fact, when I moved to Cape Town and I started living on my own, I was even more stuck to that plan. So I needed to make this happen. This was my belief. This is what I wanted. This was my path in life. And I didn't know how. But for me, it was set in stone. 9-ish, 10 years later, I met Sasha. Well, I spoke about my desire to adopt. And he was very much like, yeah, I would love to adopt. And I thought, cool. We're just discussing. We're not saying we want to adopt a kid together. Just getting to know each other. Then he says he wants 5 to 7 children. I said, this sounds amazing. This lucky woman that you find who's going to give you these kids, I'm sure it's going to be amazing. And at some stage he mentioned it again, and I was like, you do know this is not going to be me. Because I wasn't set on having a child naturally. He always wanted kids. He always wanted 2 kids with his wife before he adopted. So then when he decided that we were going to have a kid, he negotiated his way into me getting pregnant and then at some stage getting married. He'll tell a different story. But yeah, I am 0 for 3, right? And I'll talk about the third one. So we moved in together, we made this home, we got pregnant, we had Enzo, and he got some of what he wanted. Because the negotiation skills in that one is strong, right? And it worked on me, damn it. And you're going to hear how it worked on me even more during this episode. Fast forward a couple of years after Enzo's birth, and we have his diagnosis. I had gone on a holiday to Greece with my best friend, with my Kathy, and we said when I get back from that trip, we'll try for our second kid. When we came back, we got Enzo's diagnosis and we put that on hold, as I said before. Once we did the genetics consultation with the doc and we decided, okay, we're gonna move up the third to the second kid to adopt, I wasn't ready to start the process. I was still mentally mulling over what's happened with Enzo, how we're going to deal with this and everything. Sasha, once we decided we were doing the second kid, adopted, he was chomping at the bit. And I said, just give me some time. I didn't want to bring a kid in to a situation where we were still grappling with what was going on. And I think everybody would agree with that. Okay, so he backed off for I think like 3 months. He came in with his wolf pitch. He told me I need to remember that the adoption process takes a long time. What we're doing is just starting the process. And it will take a while before we have an actual child in our hands. But we needed to start engaging, finding out what we needed to do, preparing, getting the right docs, etc., etc. Now, I cannot argue with logic, and he knows it. It's my Achilles heel. So I said, okay, let's start the process. I understand you are correct. This could take a while, but it's on you to find the place, know what we need to do. I'm just, for now, along for the ride, and I'm, mulling and taking care of Enzo Pie. Let me tell you, that man, say that man, when someone says that man and you go, that man took the bulls by the horn and went into full-on wolf deluxe mode. Within 2 to 3 weeks, he had found an agency we could work with. He had understood that the agency only worked with adoptable kids, and he felt that was the way to go, and he scheduled our first meeting. So now we were starting the process. There's certain things that you need to understand. So I use the word the kid was adoptable. What that means is that this is very important, and why we decided to work with this agency was that the parental rights has ceased. So I'm going to explain what I've understood from this. When we were going through the process, they spoke us through it, and also I double-checked with the agency that we worked with, Renata from Wandisa, to look at, was there anything that I'm missing? So the parent has to go to the police station and sign your parental rights away. From the time that you sign it, there's a 60-day clock that goes on. So I'm not really sure if you safely go and abandon your kid or safely give your kid, I hate the word abandon, it feels really bad, but if you go and drop your kid in an orphanage, if they will assist with that process. I'm not sure. So if both parents come and sign the doc, then the clock starts. If they decide after 30 days that they've made a mistake, they can absolutely do that. So this is your 60 days grace period, because emotionally, either you've just given birth or you're a young mother and you're not coping, and maybe just a mental health break could help. If they decide, I've changed my mind, then they can go and take their child back. I've had this happen with people who get the kid right after the kid is born, and it is heartbreaking. So that is why we really wanted to go for an adoptable kid. The other process is if it's only the mother and the father's not known, then an ad is placed in the local newspaper. So they have to run it a certain amount of times for a certain amount of days, leave grace, and then parental rights ceases. So if you really look at it, from what I've been told, it's not impossible, but it's hard to adopt an adoptable kid before 6 months generally. The paternal parents go together and then that's 60 days, right? But if there's generally this disconnect, so there's generally a 6 months period that you're looking at. So you're not getting a kid adoptable generally younger than 6 months. I hope it all made sense. I felt like I walked myself into a wall there. Oh my word. Okay. When I was looking at Children's Act 38 of 2005, they said there's no fixed timeline, but this is the timeline that we've understood from working with the adoption agency. So There's a voluntary consent to adoption. The biological parent signs a Form 61, consent to adopt. Consent is irrevocable unless withdrawn within 60 days after signing. After this, parent loses all rights. Rights end after adoption, finalization in court, typically 6 to 12 months from placement. Okay, so then there's abandonment. The parent has had no contact with the child for a significant period of time and failed to fulfill any parental duties, and the children's court can find the child abandoned, that therefore making the child eligible for adoption without parental consent. So that already puts a 12-month period between when the child is actually abandoned or lack of contact to when they can initiate the process, the court process. Then there's the court order termination. So that's when the child's been abused, neglected, the parent has failed to support and care, is mentally unfit, violent, or the kid is at risk. And this will go, a social worker needs to investigate. The children's court has to be applied to for this kid, initiated by Department of Social Services or a formal court order. Okay, so that's a 6 to 12 months from initiation to court order, depending on the complexity. Then there's obviously a death of a parent, so custody or guardianship may be reassigned through a will, through the court, or through a Department of Social Services placement. Okay, so that's generally your timelines from a kid being able to be adopted, and that process doesn't naturally just kick off at birth, but then that's how you're looking at the ages of these kids, right? And South African law prioritizes family reunification unless the child is not safe and they are at risk. When I was speaking to Renata, she really did press on this. That is the first priority. And when that cannot be achieved, then the kid will be, brought into the adoption process. I wanted to look at abandonment in South Africa. It's so heartbreaking, the stats, but I thought it important to talk about how many kids are being abandoned. So you're looking at about 300 kids who survive abandonment every month in South Africa. And I mean survive because some of them don't. 65% of those are newborns, they're infants, and 90% of them are under the age of 1. Then of those abandonments, when you say safe and unsafe, 70% of abandonments are unsafe. So the kid is somewhere that somebody needs to find them and then take them to a safe place. The numbers are probably a lot bigger than that are reported. We did this process with Wandisa agency in Somerset West in Cape Town, and they were and still very amazing. I did speak to Renata, who was originally involved in our adoption with Maya almost 10 years ago, and just to clarify some things. So you get a form that spells out what you're going to go through the process. Then there's a form that you're being asked a lot about yourself, right? You are trying to become a certified adopted parent. And the process you go through, which is very extensive and necessary, I have no problems with it. I wish that people who were procreating would go through this process. You have identifying details, your education, your employer, your language, your religious affiliations, and your race. Then you have to give physical characteristics, your height, your weight, your skin tone, your eye color, and hair color. So I didn't really ask about hair texture, which I thought was very important, as I spoke about in my last episode. You then have contact details, if you have children, their physical characteristics, any previous marriages or relationships, your family of origin of each applicant, your source of income, of course, assets, expenses and liabilities, purchase agreements, insurance, school fees, and any loans, debts or bonds. Then you have to give them a motivation for your adoption. All fair. It's a lot of information, but if you invested in the process, it all makes sense. Then you get a form for the child that you are considering. In this form, you can indicate your preferences. What race you're looking for. Would you take a child with a birth defect? Would you take a child with certain afflictions? A child with HIV? A child born out of incest or rape? Health, gender, religion, as well as minimum and maximum age. It is basically a checklist of what you want and what you can manage. It also sets the boundaries of where the agency can look to match you with a kid. When checking in with Renata from Wandisa agency, in anticipation of this episode, she mentioned that a lot of the time they have to go outside of the Western Cape for people that come to them, because a lot of the kids who are given up for adoption or have become available for adoption suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome in the Western Cape. That is the problem. Fetal alcohol syndrome is a severe condition caused by alcohol exposure during pregnancy. It can have lifelong effects on the baby. When I researched it, it said the impacts on the baby is physical abnormalities, so a small head, facial deformities and growth deficiencies, developmental delays, slow motor development, poor coordination and delayed milestones, feeding and sleeping problems. Then the long-term effects, cognitive impairment, learning disabilities, memory issues and low IQ, behavioral issues, hyperactivity, poor impulse control, difficulty with social interactions, mental health problems with increased risk of anxiety, depression and substance abuse, academic struggles and employment difficulty in adults. So if you indicated on the form that you wanted a healthy kid, they would check in with you and really refine those boundaries. But then a lot of the time, just saying that would exclude a lot of the kids in the Western Cape. When we were going through this process, and even when I spoke to Renata recently, Americans do tend to adopt kids with disabilities. And at first I thought it was because they had a better healthcare system than ours, but they actually don't. They don't. But I do think that they get a lot of state assistance or social assistance for kids, so they are able to take on a kid with disabilities, which kudos to them, honestly, and absolutely awesome for that kid. Important for me to say at this stage is that you will feel a certain way while you are filling out this form. You might feel some guilt when you're picking those certain options, right? When you go, I don't want a kid with HIV. I don't want this, and I do want this, and it'll make you feel a certain way, which it did to us. But the thing you need to understand is that don't overstretch yourself and be honest about what you can handle and can't handle as a couple and as a parent. And knowing if you have kids at home like we did, we already had a special needs kid at home. We weren't going to take on more of that, but we really wanted to adopt a kid. So we were very honest, and that honesty might make you feel bad, but don't overstretch yourself. What I did find out at this stage was that my husband wanted a girl. I didn't know this was a thing that he wanted with his life. I said, but I'm a boy mom. But Sasha was like very clear. He wanted a little girl. Do you know, little girls just cry for no reason. And they then become hormonal. I mean, I'm a girl. I know what I went through. And we would laugh about it. He experienced the first meltdown. We asked her, why are you crying? She's like, I don't know. And he's like, what must I do with it? Oh my God, it was so hilarious. So good. See? 3. Getting married, having a kid naturally. Actually, like even just living with somebody and then having a girl. So I was 3-0. Oh my God. Given the wolf talk about adoption and it taking a really long time, when we were filling out the form, we gave actually quite a big age group that we wanted to look at. And But then while we were sitting down with the agency, going through our preferences, kind of refining things, they were like, you don't have to go that old if that's not what you want. And we were like, well, if we go for an older kid, maybe it's more possible, maybe it'll go quicker. And they were like, no, it doesn't really have that much of an impact. And we can change it afterwards. So we then picked a range of 6 months to 2 to 3 years. We met with the agency. They've been amazing. Oh my word, Cliffy, I think she's passed now. She was absolutely superb throughout this process. Renata still is in our lives and amazing. And Rose. Those were the ladies that we work with. So we were given a list of what we'll be going through in the coming months and weeks. So this was the process. You have initial intake interview where you learned all this. You had individual interviews. You had couple interviews. You had medicals. So you had to go for x-rays, etc. You had to get references. The references were submitted straight to the agency, so we didn't really get to see it. An affidavit that you are not a criminal and of your finances. Marriage certificate, because we were married. You can adopt as a single person. A financial statement, proof of employment, what medicine you're on, any therapy you're in, the contact for your psychiatrist or psychologist. When I was speaking to Renata, when we went through the process, we didn't have to declare that. And then in the form now, you can allow them to speak to that professional. She can correct me in the comments. Online learning, which is compulsory. There were webinars. When we went through it, it wasn't that South African based. They are now completely South African based, Renata assured me. So yeah, that's cool. So the online learning becomes things like, how are you going to deal with people's questions? How are you going to deal with comments? How are you going to explain to the child? So all these things are really building that foundation for when the child arrives. It's setting you up, right? I said in my previous episode, it's really important that you don't underestimate the hair portion. Especially if you're getting a girl, some stuff you're going to have to learn. Just find somebody and learn them. You need to read 2 books from a recommended list and do a book report. Yes. Put together an adoption profile for professionals you meet in the process. You get a home visit. You have to go to a group session with other potential adoptive parents. You do psychological testing, psychometric testing, and you get feedback. And you have psychological visits and recommendations. After all of this, you become a certified adoptive parent or not. We started the process in May of 2015. By September 2015, we were certified adoptive parent. I am going to close off this episode with some very important resources, and I'll link them in the show notes too. You have to ensure that the person is accredited. You have the right to ask all the questions and make sure that this person has your best interest at heart. Make sure that your views and values align. To investigate this person as much as possible if you are not going through an agency. The Western Cape government at the moment, from what Renata tells me, does not do adoptions. So I stand corrected. She said they don't have enough social workers with experience and accreditation to be able to facilitate those. So they do give those to private social workers and to these agencies, right? So these accredited child protection organizations, which I'll put down below. I've got a lot from Gauteng, Western Cape, KwaZulu-Natal. Then if you're going with a private social worker, it's very important that that person is registered and accredited by the Department of Social Development to conduct adoptions. You have the right to investigate and make sure that this person is a good fit for you, that you have the same views and values, that this person will, as an independent social worker, be able to facilitate this process for you. They must comply with the Children's Act and be registered with CACSSP. That's a lot of letters there, people. And I'll put the public register link down below. So if you're looking at going with somebody, you can look up that public register. There is inter-country adoption agency, Wandisa being one of them. So if you are coming from overseas and you want to adopt in South Africa, I do highly recommend you go to these agencies. They work under the Hague Convention of Inter-Country Adoption. They make sure that these placements are legal and ethical internationally. Then I just wanted to go on the official data of adoptions in South Africa. So we had the abandonment rates where we're looking at between 300 and 350 babies mainly being abandoned monthly. So national adoptions within South Africa, and this is a stat from April 2010 to March 2024, that was 16,593 finalized adoptions. Then inter-country adoptions, there were 2,239 finalized during the same period. That brings the total registered adoption to 18,832 over 14 years. Okay, you do the math. What is the barriers that people have when it comes to adoption? And I just had to look this up because it's not something that I considered and wasn't part of my thinking process. It could be a long process. My husband was completely determined to get us certified as adoptable parents, so he did a lot of the legwork. He was that determined and he is that organized. I saw some of this when we went to the group setting, right? There is cultural factors. I've had conversations with people about adoption and their views shock me. The lack of awareness and systemic barriers, so that limits the uptake of adoption. Then from a fostering perspective, you are being paid to foster a kid, whereas if you adopt the kid, you don't get a grant. So I'm not really sure if that's a big barrier, but it doesn't incentivize the next step, right? It is an intense process, like I said. The screening, evaluation, preparation, matching can take over 12 months to finalize. So approximately 900 to 1,000 adoptions are finalized annually in South Africa, most being domestic. You're looking at 300 kids every month. 900 to 1,000 is only being adopted and finalized. So thank you for listening to this episode. Next week, we'll talk about our family story and how we got to meet our beautiful girl and how long that actually took. It was 9 months. It was 9 months. We didn't wait a whole year before we met her. How that first meeting went, her adjustment, getting her to settle in. So please join us. This part was quite technical and process specific. The next is really the love story. The reunification as us as a family, because I believe we've always meant to be a family. So come back to listen to that. I leave you with Nelson Mandela's quote from the 8th of May 1995. There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and follow and like and comment and come back for next week's second part. Thank you. Bye.